Yo, what's up, Sats fans? I'm your host, Brady Swenson, here at Swan Signal Live, here with my boys, Brandon, John, Steven. Brandon, what's going on, man? How you doing today?
Couldn't be any better. Bitcoin's pumping, big week, vibes are high.
What's up, John? Happy Friday.
What's up, fellas? We got gold down, stocks down, bonds down, Bitcoin up. That is what I'm seeing right now.
Uncorrelated asset. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. What's up, Steven?
What a 2 weeks, man. I mean, we've been living in historic times. Excited to be here.
Another epic week. We're just going to stack epic weeks, one after the other, for quite some time to come. It's the exciting part of the 4 years. It's kind of like the World Cup or the Summer Olympics. Every 4 years, it gets really exciting for a little while. And here we are, the 4-year bull cycle. What do you guys think about? There's been a lot of talk, and I've been a part of that conversation about what this next cycle will look like. Is this going? We always say, "Is this time different?" Right? Famous last words. There are some fundamentals here that are pretty big that can justify making such a statement. Would love to hear what you have to say. We'll start with Steven.
Yeah, I will do. I mean, they tell you never to say this, but I will come out and say it. I do think this time is different.
You heard it here, folks.
Record. Like, it's a dangerous thing to say, but everything I'm seeing just shows a fundamental landscape change. I mean, there are moments in time where things accelerate, beyond what would have happened otherwise. And I think with this administration coming in, practically everyone that's been appointed either holds Bitcoin, is pro Bitcoin. I've been hearing a ton of stuff behind the scenes from close to some of these avenues. And, if we get even half of, what we're looking at here with these outcomes, I mean, it could be game changing for Bitcoin.
Agreed. Brandon, is it different?
I think the answer is yes. Steven's right. You got to caveat this one so hard, but I'll pull out two things that I think are different here. One, I think the U.S. essentially just de-risked it from any Western aligned nation state's point of view. If that cohort FOMOs in with even a small position in the next 12 to 24 months, the number's going way, way, way up. And so I think that's changed. I think we're planning to talk about it later, but I also think competitive investments in the space, let's say altcoins, I think they're going to underperform relative to previous cycles. And Brady, you let me know if you want me to go into that now or save that for the chart.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not the same as, in 2017 and in 2021, you had these grand new narratives for a lot of these altcoins. The ICO bubble in 2017, DeFi NFTs in 21. And there's just really, I mean, you have like meme coins is the thing this time. But the thing with that is it's downstream of this bifurcation of Bitcoin and crypto, where Bitcoin is the institutionalized, like institutional grade asset. It's kind of broken free. And meme coins are, it's a casino lottery ticket, which is what it always has been. Now they're honest about it. I like that a lot better. That's better, to be honest about it. But it's not the same sort of competitive dynamic.
Yeah, I think all that is different. And just on the topic of this idea of like this time it's different. Oh, you can never say it. I get all the caveats, but sometimes in history, in markets, this time really is different. And just thought of this randomly, but I'll share it for the history fans out there. If you guys like hardcore history with Dan Carlin, he has so many great shows, but one of them is called, I think it's called Blueprint for Armageddon. And it's about World War I. And he points out this amazing historical fact that at the beginning of World War I, it was people still fighting on horseback because that's how the horses before that, that's how the wars before that were fought. But then you had the machine gun in World War I. So the people who weren't prepared for that, imagine telling them, oh, this time it's different. They have machine guns. And imagine the guy on the horse is like, no, it's never different, man. It's always the same. You got to remember, sometimes it really is different. And I think in this case, That could be the case for Bitcoin in this cycle. I'm in the camp that there still are going to be big drawdowns in the neighborhood of like 30 to 50%, but I think it's only after a big run up. So I think big drawdowns still happen. What I think is different is that if you get the US adopting it as a strategic asset, I don't think you have the year to 2 long period where people are saying Bitcoin's dead, it's not a thing, it's a joke. I think that may be gone. That may be a thing of the past. So in that sense, I think that might be different moving forward.
Yeah, I had an idea of a new kind of halving added into the Bitcoin cycle, and it's the cutting in half the downward, basically the drawdown halving effectively. And so we've on average been about 80% over the last 4 cycles. It's gotten slightly lower. I think the last one was about 77%. So with these fundamental changes, huge resources of capital that could potentially come into space. So if there is a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and if the United States starts buying to add to the 210,000 that it has from asset seizures, from criminal investigations, etc., then I could see, nation state FOMO taking place. Obviously, downstream to massive corporations, BlackRock's already involved, etc. That'll just speed that up. All of that is pulled forward, and then I think you don't see a drawdown more than 40%. Like the game theory will play out that all of those dips will just be bid up, very quickly, in my opinion, and in size. And so there's just that competition. Then maybe the next halving, it's 20% max drawdown, then 10%, as we just get more and more stable, kind of like gold has been when we reach that level of an asset and beyond. I think it'll become more stable, lower drawdowns, and eventually there's no, fiat equivalent, or like fiat to Bitcoin exchange. I mean, that's assuming that fiat goes away or becomes irrelevant, which we could debate, but you just are left with ever increasing purchasing power and a deflationary money.
Yeah. I think people, the kind of knock-on effects in the game theory of the US buying Bitcoin, DCAing into Bitcoin in some cadence, and we'll talk about why that makes sense and also why people are increasingly excited about that. But just simply put, the knock-on effects in the game theory, I think it's hard for anyone to price in the sheer impact it would have, because the moment the US does that, other countries need to do it. Financial companies, Bitcoin's suddenly a major financial asset. You have to have, hedge funds, Wall Street, wealthy families, family offices. There's this huge cascade because ultimately the world is underexposed to Bitcoin. Most people don't own it. The number of people that own over $10,000 of Bitcoin, it's minuscule. It is. I had a tweet about this last week, but if you actually think about this, it is without historical precedent that an asset reached this level of geopolitical influence, of the US doing a reserve and these sorts of things, while simultaneously being so under-owned. There is no comparison of something becoming this important while still being owned by so few people, like, gold and these different things. Like, these are widespread assets. These are things that, are just widely distributed. But with Bitcoin, you're with something that is still very early in its cycle of being distributed and adopted. And so you get something like this. And again, I think there's a lot of reason to be quite optimistic that you do. It changes everything.
All right, I'll take the over on 40%. I think we will see more than a 40% drawdown from peak to trough. And I think 2 reasons. One is technical, being that I could see a intraday wick go to like astronomical numbers that you can't even believe is real, and then crash down 80% from the top of the wick. So that's one technical reason I think we will see over 40. If we throw that out, I would say I think there's significant geopolitical risks in the world. And I don't necessarily think that those are bad for Bitcoin. I just think that the entire world is a volatile place for the next period of time. And so if we have a global hot war, if we have a sovereign debt crisis that actually materializes, et cetera, I think something like that, we would definitely see more than a 40% drawdown in Bitcoin. But on the other hand, that could be a buying opportunity, and Bitcoin could go up in the dust, right?
So I have a question for you, Brandon. Let's say, assume you know for a fact there's no like black swan event. There's no big hot war. Like, let's say in normal circumstances, what would you say then on the percentage drawdown? More than 40, less than 40?
So no geopolitical events, no technical.
Nothing huge, nothing like, World War breaks out or like the COVID crash. There's these moments where you have these sudden things. Let's just say normal market structure relative
50 or 60.
50 or 60?
So less.
Still take the over.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason, guys, people still don't know what this thing is. Okay.
Yeah.
We know what Bitcoin is. People are going to FOMO into Bitcoin without truly knowing what it is, and they're going to panic sell again. So,
But to me, it's like, now that you have like institutions and nations and, just pools of capital that are far bigger than retail that drove 2017 and most of 2021, then it just changes the equation, right? Because the amount, like, it's still only a 1 point, trillion, 1.47, 1.8 trillion dollar asset right now. It's still pretty small.
Very.
And it doesn't take a whole lot to move that. So if you have access to a big pool of capital, like a giant corporation or a nation state, then you can be buying those dips up in size without, allocating that much of your capital, to be honest, like a small percentage of your capital.
So prediction I'll make is, barring a black swan, barring like a China ban or COVID or one of these kind of like, fundamental scenarios, I think during the bull market, so on the way up, not after the peak, not on the way down, that's a different conversation. But, usually in a bull market, you see like 7 or 8, 30, 35% corrections on the way up. I'm going to say we don't see that unless there is, like I said, a sudden event. But I think those dips are much smaller.
I could see it. My case for saying that it could happen would be that there's just such a fast rise up that a bunch of people kind of panic buy into it, FOMO buy into it. And then if there's a kind of, that turns on itself, maybe there's some panic selling out of it. So yeah, my case is, if there are big drawdowns, I think it's only after a really crazy run up. But I don't think it'll be coupled. Well, now I'm kind of changing the topic here. After the peak, I think after the peak will not be coupled with the Bitcoin's dead, we're not going to hear about it anymore. That's what I think is the biggest difference in future cycles. I don't think there's going to be a post 2018 bear market vibe. I don't think there's going to be a post FTX bear market vibe. I think that's what's really different.
Yeah.
do you think we'll hit the peak within, let's say, 12 to 18 months, kind of mimicking previous 4-year cycles? Or do you think we'll go up slower, longer, or faster, longer?
I mean, I think a lot of it depends on what plays out. I think right now, this promise of a much closer embrace of Bitcoin by the federal government is being priced in.
Yeah.
I don't think it's completely priced in, but there is. Does Polymarket have odds on a strategic Bitcoin reserve becoming a thing?
It's at like 70% right now and rising. It was not that. Well, there's two markets. Let's be clear. There's Polymarket and there's Kalshi. The difference in these two markets is the Polymarket market is by April. The Kalshi market is by 2026. So just sometime over the next year. So the Polymarket market was at 30%, maybe 35, maybe it's 40 now. But again, that's like by April. It's like that's a gamble. Nobody knows exactly how long it would take to get implemented. So I place less importance on that market. On the Kalshi market, which gives us the year, it's at like 70% right now. It's been rising. And I mean, I've been having a ton of conversations behind the scenes with people that are, materially close to this thing. They're feeling very good. They're feeling optimistic.
And that's what the Polymarket's telling you, is investors there getting information, rumblings of like conversations that are happening inside the transition team, that this is something real and not just a pandering promise.
There's real. So let's get into this a little bit. So there's the question of like, does this happen? And there's also the question of like, what does it do and why? And so pull up, do you have Matt Pines' tweet?
I don't, but I'll grab it.
Yeah, it's in the channel. So Matt Pines is with BPI, Bitcoin Policy Institute. They do great work, and he's a good friend of mine. And he had a great tweet talking about why, because there was also some criticism floating around Twitter. It was like, why would we do the reserve? Is this just Bitcoiners enriching themselves? Is this just profiteering? Like, we got our guy in, now make us rich. And on the surface level, I understand that critique. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. But Matt Pines had a great tweet breaking down why Bitcoin is important for the US and why it would benefit the US. And effectively what it is an argument that, you know, if we ever wanted to fight a war with China, like, not that we want to fight that war, but like, imagine we're in a scenario where we need to fight a war. If you can't effectively finance yourself in wartime conditions, you have a problem. And the Treasury market could become deeply and profoundly impaired by one of these wartime scenarios. But if we buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's a lot small. Here we go. Bitcoin's a lot smaller than gold. We kind of get it early. We support it. It has time to grow substantially higher. It actually provides us with like a profound hedge, a profound safety asset that in the very scenarios where the US Treasury is least able to finance itself, Bitcoin saves the day. And it's not even that like once we get to wartime in that scenario, it's that even having it functions as deterrence. If our geopolitical enemies know that we're sitting on 1 million coins, and they know that in a wartime scenario, while they might impair Treasury market functioning, we would actually benefit from the Bitcoin holdings, and we'd have that to wield. That actually reduces the probability of war even to begin with. And so this is an angle that I think is being really under-discussed, that this would be good for the US, not just good for Bitcoin. And of course, other people are talking about, hey, if we really embrace this thing, the value could go up so much, and it would go up so much that it could help us, you know, reduce the debt load, help the fiscal situation. So there's a ton of very real world, very practical benefits for the US. Obviously, it's good for Bitcoin, but I think it's good for America. And it's important that we have that conversation. And I think as this thing is presented, it's crucial. And this is the aspect that I really get from the critics of this. When we bring this proposal out, it needs to be very clear how it's being presented. This is for the good of everyone will benefit from this. And there's even more reasons why one would benefit from this. You actually can make a very simple argument why Bitcoin rapidly increasing in value would actually create more demand for treasuries and help the US finance itself.
You know, not to mention the US government is giving all American citizens 90 days to front run the news. Yep. So you got to appreciate that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
By the way, who's front running right now? Anyone have speculation?
I mean, I don't know anything beyond rumors on Twitter.
91K right now.
We're at 91,239 on my ticker here. Back up in the 90s. Make another run at it. 100K on Sunday.
Boom. I think people see the writing on the wall. I was talking with some people that it was some of my contacts were having a conversation with some people at major hedge funds. And at this hedge fund, which is a major one, it's, you know, close to 100 billion. All of the people on the trading floor started getting long Bitcoin last week. So I think like there may be a big entity that's in the market. I've heard rumors of that. But certainly I think there's a widespread people that just see the writing on the wall. They see where this thing is headed, and they see how much broad adoption, broad support, even friendliness from this incoming administration changes the prospects for Bitcoin entirely.
Yeah. I mean, this run up, what, $25,000 since the election. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be a nation state. Like, this could just be a persistent bid from the market pricing in a pro Bitcoin presidency in the United States. Not to mention that, but also, in Congress, there's a sweep. So, bullish for Bitcoin, and probably everyone putting some bids out there. I certainly was.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that's completely right. If there is a large notable entity buying in, even in that case, I think they're responsible for a small part of this price move. I think there's a lot of people buying.
Something I'll just say, number one, it's been a crazy busy last 10 days from a client activity perspective, new and existing. Something I've been talking about with clients for almost the whole year, kind of after that first run up with the ETF approvals, and we hit the high 60s for the first time. I said, anytime someone asked me, hey, what's your forecast for price? I was like, you know what, to be honest with you, Bitcoin could be 50K or it could be 150K in the next 6 months, and neither would surprise me.
Yep.
Now at this point, with what just happened, just like not just the election, but like leading up to the election, Trump speaking at the Bitcoin conference, Cynthia Lummis being more vocal, RFK being very vocal, all that stuff going on. Real moves for a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the US, and then Trump winning the election. Putting all that together, now it seems really hard to see 50K. So now I feel like I need to revise that to say, I don't know, Bitcoin could be anything between 70K and 150K in the next few months, and neither would surprise me, but the range is clearly moving upwards.
Yeah, clearly.
I think Bitcoiners need to get their act together a little bit, because I'm on Twitter, and whenever anything happens, I see all these accounts just tweeting, oh, we're going to dump now. It's gone too far. We're going back to that range we were stuck in. I won't even say the number. You know what number I'm talking about. There's a meme number where we were. I don't even say that number anymore. I don't think you should speak it. We're polluting the commons with all this stuff. Being bullish is a public good. You got to be in it to win right now. I'm very serious about this.
Let's just start the 580K gang right now.
If you want to do 580K
gang.
The only numbers you're allowed to mention are above the current spot price.
Correct. There's no reason to talk about numbers below the current spot.
Embrace winning. Embrace winning, Bitcoiners.
You got to win.
There's going to be so much winning. You're going to be tired of winning. Let's talk a little bit about this strategic Bitcoin reserve. This is the bill officially up on the congress.gov site. It's in the hopper, as Cynthia Lummis said, which is literally a box on the floor of the Senate where you put bills. So it's a very old school thing, but it's a tradition. The SBR, the bill basically, let's see, let me go to this. Obviously, it creates a Bitcoin reserve, this is what is in the legislation, to buy up to 1 million Bitcoins over 5 years and hold them for at least 20 years. There'll be a Bitcoin purchase program. So funding for the Bitcoin purchases will come from reallocating Federal Reserve surplus funds and adjusting gold reserves, ensuring no additional public debt is created. Then it talks about how we're going to store it, distributed keys, cold storage, regular audits, which, hey, regular audits, that's pretty nice. It's all on chain. We get to watch it. We audit it every 10 minutes. State participation. So then this is kind of cool. The states can voluntarily store their Bitcoin within the national framework, leveraging the reserve security infrastructure. So that's pretty cool. Just encouraging states to set up their own SBRs, and they don't have to worry about security. Let the feds take care of it. So those are the highlights of the bill itself. I think Lummis was out talking a little bit more about the the part of the bill that includes buying gold, or I'm sorry, selling gold to buy Bitcoin. I think to me, what's being priced in and the expectation is not that we're just going to keep this 210,000 Bitcoins, right? I think I said this at the top, but that we're actually going to start buying Bitcoin as this legislation says. And if we actually start doing that, that to me is an actual strategic Bitcoin reserve embraced. We're adding to it.
Yes.
And that's the bullish thing. So the first time, if this legislation passes, that'll be bullish. But when I see Bitcoin on chain being deposited into the BSR, addresses, and then that's game on. Like that's global nation state game theory happening.
Let's also be clear here, though, because there's one detail for this. The guys at BPI have done a legal analysis on this, and we do not need Lummis's bill to buy some Bitcoin. We would need her bill to buy as much Bitcoin as she's talking about, but by executive order, from their analysis, the president can start buying billions in Bitcoin. I mean, material amounts of Bitcoin. But so there's the bill, and then there's kind of another conversation, and both of these things are in the air at the same time.
Let's just get Trump a Swan app, and he can just sit there behind the Resolute desk and just smash by $1 billion at a time. We can
Only
do that,
if
right?
I get the Swan Force referral link on Trump's account.
Fair enough. Yeah, that'd be great.
And that we're talking about them adding. So I presume that, Stephen, that would imply there's no congressional approval needed for Trump to say, hey, the 200,000 roughly Bitcoin we own, we're holding it. And I'm in the camp that just that would be a massive, massive signal, even if they don't add another Bitcoin for the next year. If they say they're going to hold whatever that is, roughly somewhere between 15 to $20 billion worth of Bitcoin as a strategic asset, the wealthiest, most powerful nation in the world just told you that. Like that to me is a big enough signal, even if they can't get their act together to add more.
Absolutely. I mean, just doing that, it's about the knock-on effects. I agree that the one where they're buying, that's the really impactful one. But even if they just hold Bitcoin in that way, make no mistake, that will be very positive.
Do you guys think if the U.S. goes fully into the SPR, we start stacking sats as a government, however that looks, do you think that makes our geopolitical enemies more or less likely to buy Bitcoin?
More likely.
More.
Easily.
It's got to be more. And I don't think this is like too hypothetical after what happened with Russia in early 2022, when their assets, which were not really under their control, whatever treasuries that they owned, dollars that they owned. I forget if their gold even got seized, maybe all the above. But this is not some hypothetical scenario of like, oh, nations get into conflict, someone's assets might get frozen. Literally just happened 2.5 years ago. So this kind of feeds into the stuff Matthew Pines was talking about. When conflict rises, it's more likely that all of these assets, which are not neutral, decentralized assets, that somebody decides to say, nope, this country's not getting this one. So the more that the potential for conflict, even just the potential rises, the more that someone's looking at this and saying, hey, I want an asset that nobody can freeze. And last time I checked, that's basically just Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I want to hit this from another angle too, because last night, sorry, I'm just replying in the chat. Sherrod Brown is out. They were voted out. They lost their re-election. It's part of what was so good about all this, Sean. So another angle to hit this from is last night when people were criticizing the strategic Bitcoin reserve, there was a post by someone at A16Z, which is a little ironic, but they were criticizing like, hey, strategic Bitcoin reserve isn't really what's important. It's like, what about these other things? Like, and some people in chat are like, yeah, of course, like protect self-custody, right to mine, these sorts of things. And that's reasonable. And so the question is like, is buying Bitcoin for the strategic reserve, is that really what's best for Bitcoin, or are some of these other things more important? And I actually would take the stance that I actually think the strategic reserve does more than most of those things. And here's my argument. I want to hear what you guys think. Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? So the administration could pass a bunch of laws, and I hope they do, that enshrine some sort of protection for self-custody, you know, roll back Bank Secrecy Act, the tornado cash stuff, all of these things, right? And that would be good, and I hope that happens. However, those laws can be rolled back by the next hostile administration, right? A law is just a law. It's not like there forever. It's easy for another administration to come in and bully that, as well as it'd be much harder, I think, to roll back the Bank Secrecy Act than it would be to just start buying Bitcoin. But if we start buying Bitcoin, here's the thing, is let's say the US puts in a 4-year bid on buying Bitcoin. By the end of that 4-year period, some people will say, well, hey, the next administration could sell that Bitcoin. Yeah, but after 4 years, everyone in the world will own Bitcoin. Every financial firm, every country, most people with any sort of assets, it will be so widespread and so adopted that these sorts of hostile actions against it become relatively unthinkable. And so while, you know, I understand the criticism of, hey, you just want to pump the price, whatever you've got, I actually think this sort of 4-year structural adoption is the best thing to protect Bitcoin. Better than any laws, better than these other things. I hope we do that other stuff too, but this is a material step.
I hadn't thought about that aspect where which one is harder to roll back if it does happen. And yeah, I do think I agree that in theory, it's possible a new administration could come in and say, oh, look, the last administration acquired this much Bitcoin, we're going to sell it. It's possible, but I think it's really hard to see that happening, especially if the path that I think we're on keeps playing out, which is the US fiscal situation just looks worse and worse. How do you justify if they do have this asset that, I don't know, pick numbers, like they started with 15 billion and then 4 years later they own 100 billion, 200 billion because they added and plus price appreciation. How do you make the pitch to people like, we're going to get rid of this one asset that's making our books look better, while we're taking on all this massive debt, right? So I think that's really hard to see that happening. And yeah, I mean, there is some sort of like,
if there is a massive drawdown though, so Trump's administration ends, there's a Democratic administration comes in, that's the scenario, right? Then let's say Bitcoin is still in the depths of a bear market, right? Maybe just getting ready to come out of it, given the timing. That would mean like an extended bull run because of this administration. And then, you know, we kind of throw off the 4-year cycle maybe. And we have a bear market going into like that would be all the justification you would need. Be like, look, this thing is down 60%. Why are we gambling with this, you know, magic internet money at the US? This is ridiculous. This is crazy. This is the United States government, right? We're going to end that crazy Trump policy. I could see it. I could see the argument being made and maybe being effective. I think that there's a chance that happens.
And totally, I agree. But I think the counter is like, yeah, they could do that on the government level, but like everyone will have it at that point. And then you're like, you know, let's say Bitcoin is 2% of everyone's net worth, their portfolio. They put 2% of their money in. Every single person has it. There's going to be so much resistance to something like that. Like this new administration comes in, especially after losing all their freaking Senate seats because they opposed Bitcoin and says, oh, we're going to sell the Bitcoin. And everyone loses their mind. Wall Street loses their mind. BlackRock, you know, individual investors. It's, and I understand why people don't immediately go here, but truly price exposure and price performance is actually what's best for Bitcoin, protecting it in many cases. Like, I know that sounds self-serving and especially people from the outside like might think that's bullshit, but it truly is when you think about it. Bitcoin being worth more and more people owning it is the single best outcome.
Agreed, completely.
100% agree. Price is the best defense for Bitcoin, always has been. Everything else is secondary by like a order of magnitude.
And it's also Bitcoin's weakness. Because, you know, price dumps 20-30%, confidence gets lost, people don't know what it actually is, then that's just self-fulfilling to the 80%. So it's the strength and a weakness, but this is This is how a new money is, adopted. It's very volatile. It happens that way. I wouldn't see it as a weakness. I wouldn't. It's kind of they come with the other, right? So it's not really a weakness on the downside and a strength on the upside. It's like, they're two halves of the same phenomenon that's extremely important in driving Bitcoin adoption.
So Brady, you're saying if Bitcoin went into an interview and it said, what are your strengths and weaknesses? It would try to do the old cop-out answer, give a weakness, but it's really a strength at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. I draw down in US dollar price about 80% every 4 years. And, it's leads to these giant 500, 600, 700% price increases eventually. But, that's down 80%. A lot of people panic sell. I feel bad about it.
But if you stick with me, you'll be thrilled.
Yeah, exactly.
So shout out Satoshi on this one then, because I think part of the magic here is he understood how humans would interact with an asset like this if it is the best type of money. And maybe we're giving Satoshi too much credit, but I think the 4-year halving cycle, which appears to generate FOMO, maybe not. Maybe we don't have enough data to say that, but let's say that is true. I think those hype cycles are actually the fastest way to gain adoption, even though you have these mega bear markets. And the reason is it requires so much to get this new internet curiosity to be broadly understood. Not even understood, the awareness of this thing, right? People have memories of 2017 mania, Bitcoin's dead. 2021 mania, Bitcoin's dead. Right. And so you need to mega overshoot and just take over the consciousness in order to raise the awareness. And yeah, like you said, Brady, the cost of doing business like that is a big drawdown. But the drawdowns also have a unique psychological effect. Paul Tudor Jones named this reason for one of the primary reasons he went long Bitcoin and doesn't want to sell is because in the bear markets, all the psychopaths who bought the top, not all, a small percentage of the psychopaths who bought the previous cycle's top, they stick around and they figure out a way to build conviction. And those people become the hodlers of last resort. And, Paul Tudor Jones a couple of years ago said, I saw these psychopaths not selling after multiple 80% drawdowns. This is an asset I want to own. Yeah. And so Satoshi's cult, whether he intended this or not, he made a giant cult, and that is what defends the asset. And so, yeah,
I remember
price is king.
I remember Saylor talking about that too when he first came in. It made a huge impression on him. The Cyber Hornets, like he gave us a name. I mean, it was the plebs, but the Cyber Hornets, and he was just like, these people are they have such deep conviction. They're not going anywhere, and that's what you need to bootstrap an asset like this. It's phenomenal. So I think if you have this sort of steady growth, it's going to go much slower. It's going to reach fewer people. And you need those blow off tops and all that media attention that comes with it to get Bitcoin to where it is now, where pretty much everybody on the planet has heard the word Bitcoin, right? At this point.
Yeah, just one more thought on Steven's comment about the Bitcoin strategic reserve being harder to roll back. And Brady, you kind of played the other side of it. Just thinking about it a little bit more, I'm still in the camp that it's hard to see them selling because I don't think they will own enough relative to the debt to even make that case. Like there would be so much pushback. Even if they get to $1 trillion that they hold, $1 trillion in value of the Bitcoin they hold, and then it pulls back to $500 billion, right? And someone tries to make the case, oh, this pulled back by so much. What are you doing? Like, what are they going to do? They're going to sell half of their position. They're going to sell $250 billion of Bitcoin to pay down the debt that's at 45 trillion at that point. Like, what argument are you even making? It would be a drop in the bucket. So I would hope that cooler heads would prevail. And it's like, guys, like selling $250 billion of Bitcoin does nothing for our fiscal position.
Yeah, that's likely, but I can see the non-cool heads having an outsized seat at the table, especially after 20 years of Trump dominating Republican politics.
That's what I was just going to say. If we think that another administration is going to sell Trump's Bitcoin, how long is it going to be before they actually put something together that can compete?
Yeah.
The DNC is in shambles.
I'm looking at a Poly market right now, and we've got Scott Bessent up to 73% for Treasury Secretary. This is a really interesting, I don't know, call it a race or kind of competition or outcome where, I mean, this really should blow your mind. Whether we get Scott Bessent, who it looks like it's going to be, and I'm hearing, or you get Howard Lutnick. Either way, the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury of the U.S. government is going to be someone that's pro-Bitcoin. And I'm hearing more about there's good traction there. So no matter which outcome we get, you're going from Janet Yellen, who hated this whole thing, to now somebody that is vocally and consciously for it. And they're going to be in the highest kind of financial position in the country. Like you can't overstate the impact this is going to have. I mean, not just on like the laws and regulations and do they do the reserve or what, but imagine you work at Goldman Sachs. Imagine you work at, which we won't hold against John, but imagine, you work at JP Morgan and, you're coming from this critical Bitcoin position and suddenly the head of the US Treasury likes this asset. It just completely weakens any of your opposition.
So interesting. Scott Bessent, he's an American investor and hedge fund manager, known primarily for his work with Soros Fund Management. So, and he played a key role in the $1 billion profit from shorting the pound in 1992, which is, relatively famous act of financial, I don't know what you want to call it, but it was. I've actually heard about that, and I'm not in finance deeply. So he's running a fund right now backed with $2 billion from George Soros, which it's like really interesting to me since Soros is, famous for funding Democratic politicians. And he holds a significant personal Bitcoin position and believes in it long term. And yeah, so this is super, super bullish. It's the head of the Treasury Department. So he's at 73% right now. What do you think would be any difference between him and Lutnick? Is this, or why do you think he's, seems to be likely to get this appointment?
It's primarily, right now we're dealing with Game of Thrones Mar-a-Lago edition. Everyone is down in Mar-a-Lago, and it is full-blown Game of Thrones about appointment positions on who's going to get them. And so, this has to do with internal politics within the Trump campaign. Lutnick was the co-head of the transition team. So he obviously, and he runs Cantor Fitzgerald. There's some loyalty and there's some, feelings. But it seems like Bessent is going to be the pick. And obviously each kind of has their own background and qualifications, and there's a ton going on that, we're not privy to. But there's just been very kind of constant positioning. It was originally just Bessent. It was basically he was going to be the guy. At the last minute, Lutnick throws his hat into the ring. Okay. And it's been a scuffle. But
yeah, the jockeying for position, Game of Thrones drama that's happening out of Mar-a-Lago right now is pretty awesome. I would love to be like a fly on the wall or on the inside somehow and just watching this happen. There needs to be some kind of drama that comes out of this, like Netflix special, or you were talking about some kind of animation.
I would love a show that like literally just takes place in Mar-a-Lago, either like right now, like it's a drama of this competition that's happening right now down there, or even like an animated show that's set in the future of like some like, it's like Baron Trump is president and it's like some future animated drama that takes place kind of Game of Thrones style in Mar-a-Lago.
Some Dune thrown in there.
Yeah, be cool.
Right over the planet of Arrakis, we need to pick a new Baron for the spice mines.
Baron Trump. He was born for this. named for this.
I would want it to also be like The Simpsons, where they just like end up forecasting so many real things that actually happen.
We got a clip of Mr. Saylor talking.
Let me throw one
on
point on this
CNBC
last
yesterday.
thing.
Oh yeah,
Actually,
go for it,
real
man.
quick. So it's funny, like what we're witnessing right now is such a return to form. And what I'm saying is that like Trump's basically like holding court down in Mar-a-Lago, and everyone is like jockeying for positions. And this is kind of out of the ordinary in our kind of modern liberal democracy. But it is historically, it's such a return to history. Like this is what it was always like in the past. This is how power functioned, and we're getting this weird, you know, at least uncommon return. It's I find it just fascinating.
All right, we'll finish up. We got 15 minutes left. We've got a few things we can hit relatively quickly, but I think this will spark a good conversation. This is Saylor earlier this week on, I believe it's CNBC.
The United States was built by purchasing Manhattan. Then we purchased the Louisiana Territory. Then we purchased California and acquired Texas. And then we bought Alaska. The next great frontier is cyberspace. And the obvious thing to do is to own cyberspace, buy the future. And I think it's a great idea. I think it will happen. And I think it's important to the United States because it cements the United States' control over the future world reserve capital network. Senator Lummis's bill will offset $16 trillion of our debt, according to my models right now. I think it's economically wise, it's technically wise, and again, Bitcoin is manifest destiny for the United States.
Let's 16. This is huge.
Senator Lummis's bill will offset $16 trillion of our debt, according to my models right now.
Holy moly. Okay. So manifest destiny is just yet another Saylor sort of analogy, I guess, for Bitcoin. Was the idea that Americans were destined by this obvious, sort of power, or in a lot of ways, like by God, to conquer the West. And that was basically the idea. We're going to have a bunch of pioneers out in the West, and this is manifest destiny. We need to go do this. It's part of our destiny. Same thing here, right? This is just the inevitability of Bitcoin is what he's talking about. And it's another good analogy. I think a lot of people, especially in his generation, will appreciate that one. And it's the money that will take over all monies, or the asset that will take over all other assets and be superior to all of them. And this is just Bitcoin's destiny. So I love that part. $16 trillion. The debt now is what, 30 something, $34 trillion, I think. And it's just, growing extremely fast. But $16 trillion is a lot more than I thought it would be. So what's a million Bitcoin? And then he's probably pricing it out 4 years.
Yeah. Call a million Bitcoin 5% of Bitcoin. It's really more because a lot's lost, but call it 5%. Right. And so Bitcoin would have to be 16 trillion times 20. So, 232 trillion.
Yeah.
Which would be like 100x from here. So he's modeling it on basically like a 100x.
300x. From
300x?
Yeah, roughly. Because you go from 1.7 to 320. So yeah, that's doable. Definitely doable.
Saylor had modeled 20. I think he did 21-year time frame on purpose, of course.
Right.
When he did his own MicroStrategy conference, he was talking the year 2045, a 21-year outlook. So when he says on CNBC, according to his models, I'm assuming he's talking about a time frame that's like close to 20 years out there.
Okay, that makes sense. If it's 13 million a coin, that definitely would make sense. And the bill does say they will hodl for at least 20 years in the bill. So that's pretty cool. Forced hodl of 20 years. In order to undo that, it would either have to be a successful event in the court, a court decision against it. I don't think it's unconstitutional, so I don't think that would happen. The only other way to do it would be to pass a bill to undo this one. So yeah, there are definitely hurdles in place to have to undo and sell the strategic Bitcoin reserve. The law will say you got to hold it for 20 years.
I'm envisioning like the opposite. We have the debt ceiling debates now. It's like, hey, we set this limit on ourselves, but we debate, we have this song and dance, and we end up going through it. Imagine in the future, it's like we actually adhere to a date when we hold the Bitcoin, but then there's this huge debate over like, and this is a scenario where it actually does appreciate to a massive number. And then it's like, all right, we passed the date where we can actually use some of it. Imagine politicians being like, this is what I'm going to use some of the Bitcoin strategic reserve for. That's just kind of wild to think about them debating that versus how much more debt should we add next year?
Yep.
Love that flip.
I love
One
that
quick
too.
clarification, Brady. It's 36 trillion for our debt.
Okay. There you
What's
go.
a couple trillion amongst friends?
I'm falling behind. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah. And so it'd be 16 million a coin. I just got the numbers. So he's basically saying it's going to reach 16 million a coin.
Yeah, for 16 trillion, that makes sense. Wow.
And that's just on the Bitcoin price appreciation.
Right.
What happens if we lean into Bitcoin that generates more economic growth outside of simply pumping Bitcoin's price?
Right.
I think we all believe that a Bitcoin, something closer to a Bitcoin standard, would have other positive effects to the economy and society. And so we probably don't even need maybe half of those gains we can make up elsewhere. So even if Bitcoin's 50% less than what he assumes, I think we would still have that same economic impact.
Right.
Especially over 20 years. It's a long time.
It's a long time. Yeah, that's smart. Let's have a little fun and take a look at oh yeah, this is Brandon. So we were talking about inevitability and logarithmic curves. Brandon's got this provocative tweet out there. Why don't you tell us why this might happen? How this could happen?
Well, how this tweet happened is I was just bull posting like everyone else this week. Then it blew up, and then I had to actually think about it. And after thinking about it, I would probably give this a 20% chance of being true. So let's start with my actual position. That's what I think is true. In order to go from 100K to 1 million in 15 months, that would definitely require all these things to line up that we described. So nation state FOMO, sovereign wealth funds, corporate FOMO, just up only all over the place for a year straight. So I think it's possible, but 80% chance no. But really what I was trying to get at here is that trying to illustrate gradually then suddenly. And I like the poetry of the 15 months versus 15 years. So I think it's roughly accurate, though. I think once we hit the elbow of this curve, we should see growth dwarf all previous charts. Go look at the log chart of Bitcoin since existence. It's not that hard to think we overshoot on this run. And so, yeah, that's my take.
I think it's reasonable, man. I mean, if we get some of these outcomes, I really think just all bets are off. You get the reserve, you get some of these things, and it's off to the races. It's the world's biggest catch-up trade.
Are you going to wait for the dip? No, you're not. You're not going to wait for the dip. The U.S. is stacking sats. Like, get with it.
And that's a $20 trillion market cap, roughly. It's a large number, but I think Bitcoin's equilibrium price is much higher than that.
Let me size this. 20 trillion, right? That's Bitcoin, and even you'd really say 17, but 20 trillion. That is less. That is 2/3 of the value of all the residential real estate just in the US, not including commercial. Like, it's a big number for sure, but it's not like insane. Like, let me see if I can get some other numbers to size that, but it's reasonable.
It's a moving target too, right? Like prices in dollars of everything are going up as well. So it's like not going to be the exact same purchasing power that we're envisioning it today. If you say one Bitcoin is $1 million, it's not going to be what $1 million can buy you today. So that helps the price appreciation, at least nominally.
Yeah. I just got an estimate at about 50 trillion for all the US real estate. So, less than half.
According to Wikipedia, if you add up all the US's financial assets, or all assets, sorry, not just financial assets, it's around 270 trillion.
Yeah.
So seems reasonable.
I think I saw 900 trillion is the estimate for assets globally, which is a little crazy just because once that increases a bit more, we're all going to have to get used to using the word quadrillion.
Yep.
That's not really a word that any of us use on a regular basis, but it's coming.
The only time I ever use it is when I tell people how many Satoshis there are.
Yeah.
2.1 quadrillion Satoshis.
They're like, what?
Yeah. Let's take a look at, here we go.
One more comment before we go to that.
Yep.
Just to bring context to numbers. We're like kind of playing with numbers here.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember Obama's big TARP bailout?
Yeah.
It was the biggest number ever. People couldn't believe it. And
I think it was 800 billion. Is that
800 million.
No, see, that's how.
Sorry, billion.
Yeah,
Don't listen to me.
billion. Yeah,
but it's still a tiny number compared to today.
Yeah.
If you look at the bills we passed during COVID, like the Inflation Reduction Act, we sent 700 million to rehabilitate robins with deformed wings in the upper Midwest region.
Yeah.
Okay. Like we earmarked 700 billion for whatever you want.
We could do a whole other show on this, but it's just the political system is so messed up because there's so much money in it, and all of these little things are favors to donors. That's what, or like family members or something like that. And those little ones, they add up. But the real problem is, and this is what RFK Jr. wants to address, is when you basically own like policy development for your industry, whether that be pharma or food, as a couple of examples, that's how you end up getting just completely unhealthy stuff, because it's cheap for them to throw this sludge into the cereal, and it drives up their profit margins. So it's worth them donating $100 million across a bunch of candidates so that they can get these these regulations changed and be able to feed the United States sludge. Right. This is how all of this happens, and it's just all controlled by big money. Read Republic Lost if you want to kind of go down that rabbit hole. It's what sent me down the rabbit hole. It was right around Occupy Wall Street times, so like 2008, 2009, when Bitcoin network started, coincidentally or not. And it goes into how do you get your republic back? How can you get it back from this corrupted political process? Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I love thinking about it, but maybe it's something that we can actually address now with a president who likes to kind of turn the system upside down and drastic change. I mean, that's what it would take. It would take massively drastic change in the way that our elections are run. Anyway, let's take a quick look at Sad Peter Schiff. This is the gold chart from 2010, from the time that Bitcoin had a trading price, all the way down to now. And there was a nice little run up. Gold kind of got ahead of Bitcoin there for a little while, and now here we are. There's a big dump. This is a monthly chart. So now he's asking if he can attend the 100K party. I thought that was actually pretty funny. He's pretty funny sometimes.
He can be a good sport. So here's what's cool here, right? Because you can do this thing where if you chart from the dawn of Bitcoin, everything looks like nothing in comparison to it because its early price performance was so large. But what's really notable here, you can take it from the peak in 2017, right? Yeah. So you bought it at 20K,
be right
peak
by
in
here.
2017. It wasn't, you weren't uber early. You didn't buy it at $1. And I mean, you still gain tremendously against gold over that time. So it's like,
this is a log chart. So I mean, we
got, I mean, that's a massive, if you're looking at like maybe 0.06, 0.07 down to almost 0.026 if you bought at the top of 2017. I mean,
So anyway, gold, we're coming for you. We're well on the way.
Also,
almost 20% there. What's that?
One shout out to gold, kind of tying into John's comment earlier, which was that fiat's going down simultaneously as Bitcoin's going up, right? And so I think it's a better denominator would be Bitcoin, or sorry, would be gold. So
Sure.
pricing Bitcoin in gold rather than the fiat, because it's a melting ice cube.
Yeah, I think it's a better comparison.
Yeah.
Something on this. So I responded to a comment on Twitter about this, but people will often say this thing like Bitcoin's not going up, dollars are going down. And that can be true in some cases, but in this scenario, Bitcoin is literally going up. Like that is not what's happening. There is a massive repricing of Bitcoin happening. Like the US dollar did not inflate 40% in the last month, right? Like you're having something change in Bitcoin. Bitcoin can go up because the dollar goes down, but it can also go up just because it goes up.
Yeah, and Bitcoin has outpaced inflation. So
Yes.
you can just be clear about that. One more, let's be sad for one of our former competitors. This is the ETH chart. Parker Lewis posting it. Crypto's been a long con, especially Ethereum, peddled by grift. Once Ethereum fully collapses, the death of crypto will be near, and Bitcoin will be much easier for people to understand. And this is a good point. Like crypto has made it so much harder to educate and market Bitcoin than it's literally given Bitcoin a bad name, and that is changing. This is very satisfying to see, to me personally. And yeah, I just love how this, like, somebody tried to pump it up and reverse the trend and just got nuked right away.
I mean, it's just astonishing that, and on paper, the Trump win should have been bullish for Ethereum in some ways. You can make an argument like, well, actually, the only way Ethereum was going to make it was like regulatory capture and keeping Solana out of the ETF. But, that aside, it should have been good. It should have been like, oh, all the crypto stuff does well, DeFi, blah, blah, blah. And it pumped after that, and it's got completely retraced. I mean, Ethereum is really in a rough spot here.
You guys just alerted me to the fact that it's high. I just looked at the 1-year chart. I assumed that Ethereum hit a high earlier this year. I was mistaken. Ethereum's high was back in 2021, around 4,800 and change. So
against Bitcoin?
No, just its nominal high was in 2021. And
this thing's just been bleeding out against
it's
Bitcoin.
Like down 35% versus its own all-time high. So Bitcoin being at 90K, Trump getting elected, pro-crypto regime, not even that has been enough to get Ethereum to an all-time high.
Yep.
So wait on. If we go back to December 2020, wasn't that also the case? Bitcoin's firmly in all-time high mode. ETH is totally still dead. I don't have a chart up, but I do remember this lag happening every single time, and then we all get overconfident, and then somehow gambler and spirits come back from the market, and this thing rips.
Yeah.
So I think there's a chance Ethereum still does rip, and all the other shitcoins, just like every other cycle. However, I think this is the first cycle with alternatives for that market segment to participate in. So they can go punt on MicroStrategy options. They can go do NFTs on Bitcoin. The Ethereum narrative's in shambles. So using the chain isn't as good as maybe it once was, and upstarts who have no decentralization or a better experience. So ETH's kind of caught in the middle, but I think you just dilute where the gamblers go. That's more or less my takeaway.
There's also, sorry, go ahead.
That's pretty much it. You dilute where the gambling goes, and some of the gambling is now in Bitcoin land. Simultaneously, one more point in the pro-Bitcoin side is all the energy around it as being a financial asset. It really does differentiate between this tech VC pseudo equity play that you might call crypto.
Yeah. There's also meme coins now, which there is a redeeming factor in that they don't pass themselves off as something they're not, right? It's just a meme coin. It's just it's just gambling. And that's what it is. All these other cryptos, market, it's like Bitcoin and we've improved this part, or we can do all these contracts and here's our schema of like how complicated and thus, amazing this thing must be, when really is just pump and dump coin. And all that stuff is bullshit, and they're lying to you. At least with the meme coin, it's like, okay, but it's just a bet. Like I sort of would prefer to get all the stuff that's lying about Bitcoin out of here and just have it,
100%.
have the gambling coins. Yeah.
And one other change, two things actually. First, Ben, if you're long sleeves, you're short Bitcoin. I hate to break it to you. Two. So in previous bull markets, like Coinbase was the onboarding platform, right? And so people came onto Coinbase, they bought Bitcoin, and then Coinbase upsold them into tons of other cryptos. In this bull market, the spot ETFs are a huge one of the onboarding platforms. And once you buy the spot ETF, there's no Dogecoin ETF. You don't rotate. The money stays in there. And so I think what drove this dynamic in a lot of these other cycles was that the money rotated. All that money, all those billions going into the spot ETF, that is not rotating.
That's a fair point. And as I look at the screen of altcoin nonsense, I'm still amazed at the fact that Dogecoin has a $55 billion market cap.
Well,
So
I mean, Doge, like, with Elon and the Department of Government Efficiency and everything like that, that dude, he's always wanted to meme that thing to the moon. And so it's going to happen. Like Dogecoin is going to be the first currency on Mars. Humans
like memes and gambling. Hard to get away from that.
Yeah, it's like the funniest thing is usually the outcome or something like that.
One more knock on that, your point, Stephen, about not having shitcoins to gamble once you're on the ETFs platform. As a email marketer for a long time, I keep an eye on our competitors, right? As one does. And yes, our competitors send like cum rockets at all-time high to the entire Coinbase list every single bull market. So yeah, not only does Coinbase charge a little too high fees and whatever, we can knock them for service. That stuff's hard. They market your grandma cum rocket at the peak. Okay, think about that.
Just think about that. You should probably use Swan. We don't do that shit. All right, we'll treat your grandmother with respect, and we'll send her education that she can understand, and we'll help you orange pill her. And speaking of which, the Swan app is the best way to orange pill someone. We spent the bear market building this thing. The onboarding experience with the Swan app is absolutely incredible. It's 2 or 3 minutes. Like you can. Some people go from like in 1 minute from like, KYC, add a bank account, buying sats in 1 minute. So I think on average it's like 2 or 3 minutes. You can stand next to your grandma and she can pull out her phone, search Swan Bitcoin, and start buying her first sats in like 3 minutes, and then she'll be receiving a bunch of education from us. So I think that the Swan app experience is like the best way to onboard someone. You should check it out. If you don't have a Swan account yet, do it for yourself. I think John and Steven are going to hop off to go sling some corn, and we'll end up with a fun little video about the Swan app. Oh, and we do this every Friday, the four of us, and we'll be back next Friday, always talking about Bitcoin and what's going on. If you enjoyed the show, maybe you joined late, you can find the podcast in your podcast app. Just search Swan Signal. The replay will be on YouTube and on Twitter as well. So you can search the Swan Bitcoin YouTube channel and subscribe there. Lots of awesome stuff that gets put out there. Shout out to the director of content, Hurley. I know you're watching, bud. You're doing killer work. So check out Swan YouTube, Swan Signal podcast, the Swan app, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, y'all.
Future, here I come. Come on, Max. There's no turning back now. Okay, do I have everything I need? Duct tape? Check. Swiss Army knife? Check. Chapstick? Check. Money? Oh no! What kind of money do they even use in the future?
Hello there.
What? Who are you?
Traveling to the future, are we?
Yes?
excellent idea. The future is bright indeed. You are, however, going to need some money.
Look, I don't know who you are, but I gotta get moving. Security will be here in just a few minutes.
Splendid. A few minutes is just about all you need to get some Bitcoin with the Swan app.
Huh, Bitcoin. Why didn't I think of that? Plus, imagine how much it'll be worth in the future. And done. Okay, time to go. Thanks, Swan.
My pleasure. Buy Bitcoin with the Swan app before traveling to